Imagine a world where the thunder of cannon fire at Gettysburg doesn't echo Lincoln's triumph, but Robert E. Lee's unbreakable will. No sacred fields turned hallowed ground. No Emancipation Proclamation to rally the North. Just the sharp crack of independence. The Confederacy rises, victorious.
A split America, the industrial Yankee North grinding on alone, and a sprawling Dixie South free to forge its own fiery path.
Today we're plunging into this alternate timeline, from the blood-soaked pivot of 1863 to a fractured 2025 where borders are battle lines and Thanksgiving is a tense truce. From drone patrols over the Appalachians to rival superpowers awing each other's throats, you won't believe how close we came. Stick around, this What If might just rewrite your history books. Welcome to Alternate Histories, where the past branches and the future bleeds red, white, and divided.
To grasp this divergence, let's rewind to the powder keg of 1861. America, that grand experiment in liberty, teeters on the brink after decades of friction over slavery's expansion, states' rights, and economic divides. The North, buzzing with factories, railroads, and over 90% of the nation's manufacturing capacity, clashes against the agrarian South, where King Cotton, supplying 75% of the world's cotton, relied on 4 million enslaved people for its plantation economy.
Enter Abraham Lincoln, the rail splitter from Illinois, elected in November 1860 on a platform to halt slavery's spread into new territories, like Kansas and Nebraska, inflamed by the violent, bleeding Kansas clashes of the 1850s. The South sees red. South Carolina secedes first on December 20th, 1860, like dominoes in a line. 11 states follow by June 1861. Birthing the Confederate States of America under Jefferson Davis, a former U.S. Senator and Mexican War hero. Fort Sumter falls in April 1861 after a 34-hour bombardment, and the bloodiest war in U.S. history ignites, pitting the Union's 22 million people and tenfold industrial edge against the CSA's 9 million, including 3.5 million enslaved. By 1863, the Union boasts twice the manpower and 10 times the industry, but the Confederacy fights like cornered wolves on home soil. Draft riots scorch New York, over 120 dead in July '63. Vicksburg siege starves the Mississippi, cutting the CSA in two. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, issued January 1, 1863, frees slaves in rebel states as a war measure, turning the conflict into a moral crusade and boosting Union recruitment. The world watches. Britain and France eye Southern cotton, whispering of intervention, despite their own abolition in 1833 and 1848. One push, one break, and the Union cracks. This is the stage set for our what if, where desperation turns to destiny.
Our timeline forks here, July 1 through 3, 1863. The fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Lee's audacious invasion of the North to relieve pressure on Vicksburg and rally Northern war weariness. In reality, Lee's bold push stalls after early games. J.E.B. Stuart's cavalry arrives late, missing vital intel. Pickett's charge on July 3rd falters under withering Union fire from 1,000 yards, costing 6,000 casualties in 30 minutes as 12,500 Confederates advance across open fields towards Cemetery Ridge. But what if? Imagine sharper Confederate scouts, no Stuart's blunder. Lee anticipates Meade's defensive lines at Seminary Ridge. Dawn of the third day, rebel artillery, over 150 guns, rains hell more effectively, silencing 80 Union cannons in the artillery duel that shook the earth for 2 hours. Pickett's men, joined by Pettigrew and Trimble for 15,000 strong, don't break, they surge, bayonets gleaming over the stone wall at the angle. Chamberlain's 20th Maine crumbles under enfilading fire, the high ground falls. Union lines shatter, retreating in chaos amid 28,000 total casualties on both sides. Word races south. Victory! Emboldened, Bragg holds Vicksburg. Grant's siege fails without Gettysburg's momentum, preserving the Mississippi lifeline. Lincoln, reeling from riots and desertions, faces the howling Congress demanding peace. By November '63, amid the Copperhead anti-war fervor, peace feelers emerge. The 1864 election, a humiliated McClellan, the Democratic peace candidate, topples the rail splitter with 55% of the vote. Armistice signed in Richmond, January 1865. The Confederacy stands sovereign. Borders etched from the Potomac to the Rio Grande, claiming Kentucky, Missouri, even Indian Territory per the CSA Constitution's expansion clauses. One battle's whisper becomes two nations' roar. The die is cast, America sundered.
The smoke clears, but the scars fester. In the newborn Confederacy, slavery doesn't vanish overnight. Historically, the CSA Constitution enshrined it as untouchable, but post-victory economic pressures and British and French abolitionist trade demands force a grim evolution by the 1870s. Peonage systems bind 4 million freedmen in sharecropping debt traps on vast 1,000-acre plantations, echoing real post-war patterns, but without federal oversight. Jefferson Davis's government, propped by 15 million pounds in British loans and French recognition, booms. The South's 9,000 miles of railroads doubled by 1880, turning Atlanta, already a rail nexus, into a steampunk hub of textile mills, processing 4 million cotton bales annually, and tobacco barons rivaling Virginia's pre-war output. By 1880, the CSA's GDP rivals Britain's colonies. Spindletop's 1901 oil gushes, discovered earlier via Yankee defectors, blackened the Texas horizon, fueling exports that soared 300%. But shadows loom. Racial castes harden under black codes expanded nationwide. Uprisings like the 1866 Memphis riot flicker in the Delta, crushed by state militias numbering 100,000 veterans. Across the Potomac, the United States, now just the 22 free states from Maine to California, lakes wounds with 2.2 million veterans demobilized. Radical Republicans seized Congress in the 1866 midterms, enforcing iron-fisted abolition via the 13th Amendment in loyal states, but Reconstruction, a fever dream south of the line, limited to border skirmishes. Isolationism grips Washington. No Monroe Doctrine flex against European meddling, the U.S. eyes inward forging steel empires in Pittsburgh, producing 70% of U.S. iron by 1870, and Chicago's meatpacking revolution. Immigrants, 4 million Irish and Germans by 1880, flood the factories, earthing a labor movement fiercer than our timeline's nights of labor, striking for 8-hour days amid Gilded Age booms. Globally, the ripple. No unified Yankee muscle means Europe meddles. Spain clings to Cuba until 1988 revolves. Mexico fractures further into French puppets. The Great War, a distant European squabble in 1914, with CSA neutrality selling 500,000 Enfield rifles for gold, echoing real Confederate arms deals. By 1900, two Americas stand tall and estranged. One pastoral and proud with fewer than 50 cities, over 50,000. The other nakedized and brooding, with urban hubs doubling every decade. The cost of victory? A continent's quiet fraction.
Fast forward through the century of schisms. World War I erupts in 1914, but without the unified U.S. sending 2 million doughboys and $10 billion in loans that tipped the scales in our timeline, the trenches grind longer. Perhaps 3 million more dead before a weary armistice in 1919. Rifles, modeled on their wartime designs to the Kaiser for cotton futures, while the U.S. dithers, sending half-hearted $5 billion loans to the Allies amid isolationist debates echoing the real 1916 election. Versailles, a farce. With no League of Nations, Hitler's rise unchecked as a humiliated but intact Germany avoids full reparations. Then, the Black Swan, Pearl Harbor analog, December 41. Japan strikes both fleets, Honolulu for the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron and Galveston for the CSA's oil shipping armada, exploiting divided defenses. A fractured response. The North declares war under a Roosevelt-like figure, dragging the South in via shared Pacific claims and the Monroe Doctrine's remnants. But Dixie, oil-thirsty, producing 60% of Allied fuel in our history, sells 20 million barrels to Berlin until the 1942 embargo bites, prolonging the European theater by 6 months. 145, By 1945, a bloodier Normandy costing 50,000 more lives as divided Lend-Lease aid, $50 billion total, split unevenly, hampers buildup. Holocaust horrors mount in the shadows, with fewer disruptions to Nazi camps. Post-war, the Cold War chills differently. The U.S., a capitalist fortress from Seattle to Boston, with 70% of North American industry, leads a rump NATO. The CSA, under Dixiocracy strongmen like a fictional Huey Long successor, flirts with Moscow for tractor tech trades, enforcing eternal Jim Crow with 50,000-man secret police modeled on the real Klan's terror. Proxy wars rage in a balkanized Mexico, Yankee-backed Democrats versus rebel narco-lords exporting opium instead of cotton. Tech divides. NASA's rockets launched from Cleveland, achieving moon landing in '69 with von Braun's team intact. CSA pioneers hydraulic fracking by 1920s patents, birthing an OPEC ally by '70 with 40% global reserves. Culture? Hollywood splits. Gritty westerns from Atlanta studios, drawing on 500 real Civil War films legacy, versus noir thrillers from New York. No Beatles invasion. Instead, a Nashville Britpop fusion via CSA's real post-war music boom. By 2000, the divide deepens. 9/11 hits twin targets in both capitals, New York and Richmond, forging uneasy alliances, but trust as thin as Potomac fog.
Dawn of the 21st. Our bifurcated behemoths face tomorrow's tempests. The United States, the Northern Union, a progressive colossus, mandates green energy from the Great Lakes under policies echoing the real New Deal's TVA, but nationwide. Universal care in every clinic, modeled on 1935 Social Security. But strains under refugee tides, fleeting southern droughts, worsened by unchecked industrialization. Megacities like Detroit 2.0 pulse with AI ethics debates, yet taxes choke the Rust Belt revival, with GDP per capita 20% higher than our timelines, but inequality mirroring Gilded Age gaps. Across the line, the Confederate States, rebranded Dixie Republic in a 1920 constitutional tweak, reigns as energy emperor. Fracking fleets dot the Gulf, extracting from the real Eagle Ford shale, discovered earlier. Rare earth mines in Arizona fuel Beijing pacts worth $100 billion annually. Borders fortified with drone swarms and Yankee-proof walls, echoing the real 1862 CSS Virginia's ironclad legacy. Society? A conservative tapestry. Theocracy-tinged laws from Richmond's Dome, where Sunday sermons sway elections like the real Bible Belt's 1925 Scopes trial backlash, and heritage festivals glorify the lost cause with monuments to 260,000 CSA dead. Culture clashes. The NFL fractures into Yankee League precision, rooted in 1890s college football, versus rebel rodeo brawls. Music wars pit Motown evolutions against outlaw country anthems from Nashville's Grand Ole Opry, founded 1925. Geopolitics? Tense tango. CSA vetoes UN climate accords for oil quotas, sparking border skirmishes over Appalachian aquifers, reminiscent of real 1862 Shiloh water fights, but with laser-guided drones. Thanksgiving 2025? A DMZ feast under watchful satellites, families split by checkpoints tracing the real Mason-Dixon line surveyed in 1763. Echoes of today. Our real divides, red-blue rifts, culture wars, amplified into nations, much like the 1850 Compromise debates that nearly split the Union early. A Confederate win births prosperity for some, but at unity's grave. In this mirror, do we see warning, or what might have been?
There it is. A Confederate victory saves Dixie from ruin, but dooms America's dream of e pluribus unum.
much like the fragile 1787 Constitution that barely held the original 13 states together. Utopia for the victors, or a dystopia of endless what-ifs, as explored in McKinley Cantor's novel Where the CSA Thrives Uneasily? What do you think? Would you thrive in the CSA's sun-baked fields or the Union's steel embrace? Drop your takes in the comments. Let's debate this timeline's echoes in our own divided house. If this alt history hooked you, smash that like. Glad we're one nation or nah? Subscribe for more branches. Next up, what if the revolution flopped? Hit the bell, share with a history nerd, and remember, the past is written, but the what-ifs, they're ours to explore. Thanks for watching Alternate Histories. Until the next fork.